Good morning and dzień dobry, guys. I'm not sure my Polish pronunciation is correct, but first of all, I really appreciate for your gathering to this session. So actually in this session, I'm going to talk about runtime permissions, which Google has released at the last GoogleIO. And I'm going to give you 3 topics, what the change actually is and what things we have to take care about. And finally, I introduce one library which helps developers handling with this permissions problem. So have you written codes which handle runtime permissions already? Okay, maybe half of this room. Okay, I hope this session will provide some helpful tips for you. And actually, I already posted this slide on Twitter with hashtag droidcon2015. So if the font is small for you, please check my link. Okay. So before we get started, please let me introduce myself a little bit. Because this is the first time I have a talk in DroidCon Kraków, and actually I come from outside of Poland and even Europe. So where I come from, it's from Tokyo, Japan, and the Ninja and Ruby country. Have you written Ruby? Ah, okay. So it was about 18 hours flight, and I have been fighting with jet lag now. So my name is Shintaro Katafuchi, and my GitHub and Twitter account is Hotokemi. So please feel free to ask me something on Twitter later. And I'm working at the Recruit Group, which is a Japanese company name. It's just a Japanese company, but we have acquired Indeed.com and some US or Europe-based startup and trying to be a global company. And I'm the member of Droid Kaigi. So what is Droid Kaigi? It's actually the biggest Android conference in Japan. Kaigi means meeting in Japanese, but it's not such a enterprise stuff. It's like a conference for the developers like this droidcon. Some guys may know Ruby Kaigi. It's the same meaning. It will be held in next February 18th and 19th. Unfortunately, call for paper is already closed, but registration is opening now. So we will have English and some Japanese talk, maybe. Please check it out if you are interested in. Hashtag of Twitter is droidkaigi, and URL is droidkaigi.github.io2016. Yeah, so that's my introduction. So today's topic is, again, about runtime permissions. Before runtime permissions, user grant permissions at the install time on Google Play. So the problem is like, user can't understand where permissions are actually used. So some users give up to install the app if the permission list has a scary one, like Android ID or something like that. And another regrettable point is when the app is updated and the permission is added, users have to check on the Google Play again, So in that case, some angry users review like, I hate it, monster, which is the most scary words for Android developers. And so that's why Google has changed the system. After runtime permissions, user can check permissions when they first use it. Think about a free market app. User check the camera permission when they press the camera icon for the first time to take the photo. And after press the icon, Android framework shows the dialog and user can choose, okay, I'm okay with it or I'm not okay with it. And not only at the first time, user can also manage permissions from settings screen. This is a Twitter permission settings screen. And when the permission is granted or revoked from settings screen, app's process is restarted. One more topic about dialog is the checkbox, which is called never ask again. This is. And if user, this dialog is appeared only when your app's target SDK version is 23 and up. If user have denied the permission before, checkbox is appeared, and if user check this checkbox and press the deny button, Android framework never shows dialog again. It becomes always returns denied result. In this case, the all thing app can do is to lead user to system screen of app. You can launch app settings by this intent. Okay, that is the basic overview of runtime permissions behavior. So next topic is which permissions do we have to handle? All of them or most of them? Actually, which you have to handle is most of the dangerous levels permissions. Android framework has some protection level for each permission, and normal permission is which you don't have to take care about. So normal permission is granted automatically by the system, and it includes internet, Bluetooth, or NFC, like that. So for more detail, please see the androiddeveloper.com. And speaking about the dangerous permissions, it has 9 permission group. Calendar, camera, contacts, location, microphone, phone, sensors, SMS, and storages. And each permission group has some permissions. And we also have to consider about custom permissions, which has its protection level is dangerous. This is Twitter's app example. And one point that you must not forget is permissions which belongs to same permission group are granted or revoked at the same time. For example, think about read calendar and write calendar. When the app first requests read calendar permission, the system shows a dialog to user. If user press allow button, not only read calendar, but also write calendar are granted. So next time the app requests write calendar permission, system doesn't show dialog because it's already granted. And it just returns, okay, it's already granted. And never ask again is the same stuff. So I think it's kind of confusing requirement, and you should provide user to adequate explanation or reading about it. It just returns denied. And I have to point out some special permissions. That's system allowed window and write settings. I guess most of the apps don't need to use these permissions because they are kind of quite sensitive stuff. But when you want to use these permissions, write these codes to grant or revoked permissions. It's kind of exceptional flow, so you should remember these exceptional cases. So other tips are here. The first is permission setting is actually shared with other app which has the same shared user ID. And second is manifest trick is max target SDK version and uses permission SDK 23. For example, from the KitKat, there is no need to use write external storage to call get external cache deals. So this is so helpful to avoid no necessary request. And uses permission SDK 23 is used only devices OS is 23, but I'm not sure how to use it effectively. And Finally, I introduce my tiny script, mPermissionsChecker. This helps you to find the permission which is needed to handle. Usage is quite simple. Download it, move it to your app's current root directory, and execute this Python script. Results is like that. Okay, so how to write exact code? There is a diagram of your app's target SDK version and device OS metrics. If device OS is under Marshmallow, you don't have to take care about runtime permissions because the system doesn't know about it. So what you have to take care about when target SDK version over 23 OS device is M and target SDK version under 23 OS device is M. If the target SDK version is 23 and up, it's just normal flow. Think about app uses camera feature. So this show camera method is actually uses camera permission. First, you declare the request code which identify each request. And next, you declare the permission which you want to use as a string array. It means you can declare the multiple permission in one string array. And next is add check permissions code before show camera. Actually, there are some way to check permission, but my recommendation is using PermissionChecker in support before. I'm gonna explain the reason later. And if app has no permission, you should check should show request permission rationale. This method is kind of confusing, but it actually returns true if user have denied the permission before. It means it gives the chance to show some explanation why this permission is needed for the app. And after calling should show request permission rationale, you call request permission, which shows dialog for user. And next is on request permissions result. It's the callback method of request permissions. So if request code is request show camera, you check the result is granted or not. If it's granted, go ahead, just go show camera. But if it's not granted, you should check should show request permission rationale again. If it's true in this timing, you just show denied action like toast or snackbird to sorry, you denied this permission, camera can't be used. And if should show request permission rationale returns false, it means user checked never ask again after that. So request permission doesn't show dialog and results of on request permission result is always denied. So my recommendation is again let user to settings screen and excuses like sorry please grant this permission by hand. Basically, it's the flow of permissions code. And next one is just the corner case. Some developer may don't want to update target SDK version to M soon. In my case, I use Body as a GitHub module. And Body uses, Apache HTTP client API. So when I update target SDK version, compiler shows a ton of error because Apache HTTP API is deleted from M. So I gave up my mind and have not updated yet. So again, user can revoke permissions from settings screen if device OS is M. So and the code is basically the same as the last one, but and as I said, my recommendation is using PermissionsChecker in this timing. So the reason is like if user revokes the permission from settings, we expect return denied from this method, of course. But actually, some compat class like ContextCompat or ActivityCompat or FragmentCompat return permission granted if in this timing. So if you use this class for checking, the app calls show camera without permissions. So that's why I recommend PermissionChecker for check. And in this case, PermissionChecker.check self permission returns permission denied app op. Have you heard about app ops? Okay. So it was a secret feature of Android 4.3. I'm not sure why this flag is still used in this case, but it returns app op flag. And speaking about on request permissions result, in this case, you should check permission again in this method. So why? Because request permission always return granted even if user pressed the deny button in this case. So I don't know why requirement is such a confusing, but you have to do is to avoid calling a method without permission with this check again. And you don't have to take care about never ask again in this case. Okay, that's about the code. We saw a bunch of boilerplate code. And next topic is about design pattern. AndroidDeveloper.com says there are 3 good practices. One is consider using an intent. Second is only ask for permissions you need. And last is explain why you need permissions. First, consider using an intent. And that really makes sense because Android has an intent system. So, I mean, if you don't need to provide users custom, like gorgeous camera, only you have to do is start activity of camera app and receives the result. Second, only ask for permissions you need. That also really makes sense because you don't have to declare unused permissions, right? The last is explain why you need permissions. Let's dive into it. So Google.com design shows one diagram which how to decide the way to explain about permissions. It says like if the permission is critical for app, ask up front. And if the permission is unclear to where to use it, educate user. First one is educate upfront. If your app has a welcome or tutorial screen, use it to explain what your app does and why unexpected permissions will be requested. Next is ask upfront. Ask for critical permissions on first launch. For example, Google Hangout requests SMS permissions upfront. That makes sense because you don't have to show educate screen because it's just messaging app. And next is educate in context. For example, Google Map requires record audio permission to use voice navigator. I think it's a little bit unexpected usage, so showing an explanation is good for user. And last is ask in context. It means like wait until a feature is invoked to request permission. Google Notes requires voice audio permission when user first used to use the voice memo feature. It's not the main feature of Google Notes, so wait until a feature is invoked is good choice, I think. Right, so that's the design pattern of runtime permissions. So let's try to add first permissions in the activity. So this is the code that we add one permissions, Android permission.camera. Okay, so cool. add more one permission. We added read contact permissions. The font becomes very small. So I think we must be just tired of, because it's just a boilerplate code, and it makes fat the activity or fragment and complicates the entire logic, right? But no worries. This is the last topic of my session, and I'm gonna introduce one library to help you. That is the PermissionsDispatcher, developed by I and Marcel, a cool German guy. So it uses annotation processing and generates boilerplate code at the compile time. So I don't talk about annotation processing detail, but processor module is written with Kotlin. So I think some guys will have a talk about Kotlin tomorrow. So I'm very interested in it because so Kotlin has some cool feature. That's why we choose it. It also supports API levels for an app. It means like you can use it even your app's target SDK version is under 23. And it solves the problem like as I mentioned before. Okay, so let's see the usage. So actually, we provide 5 annotations and required runtime permissions and needs permission. Others are optional stuff. First, you declare dependencies at the build Gradle and apply Android APT plugin because it uses annotation processing. And latest version is 2.1. I released it this morning. And next, you annotate the activity or fragment, includes support v4, which requires permissions. And next is needs permission. Annotate the method which actually uses the permission. You can declare single and multiple permissions. And this is on permission denied, is used for when user denies a permission. You should put the same permission which used at the needs permission annotation. And next, on shouldRationale, you can use some asynchronous UI control like shouDialog or shouCustomView with this permission request object. So in example, app shows alert dialog, and if user press OK button, require permission of ActivityCompat or FragmentCompat is called. And if user press cancel button, method which annotated with on permission denied is called. And Nebraska again is called, when the user checked Nebraska again and pressed the deny button. So with these annotations, all you have to do is to call the methods generated by processor. So actually, PermissionsDispatcher generates a class suffixed with PermissionsDispatcher, and you call the methods suffixed with check. So in this case, the library generates the show camera with check because we annotated the show camera with needs permission. And next one is call generated on request permissions result in the original on request permissions result. Yeah, so that's it. There is no if-else statement in the activity, and the logic becomes quite simple, right? And this is generated code by annotation processor. I don't explain the detail, but if you are interested in, please see it on GitHub and touch the sample module of GitHub. Okay, the time is so fast, but finally let me wrap up my key points. First is you can't run away from runtime permissions because it's a drastic change of Android world, and you have to update target SDK version to keep up the latest API of Android. But as I said, runtime permission is sometimes difficult to handle and sometimes kinda confusing. So, and third is follow good practice to provide better user experience. Google has released the design guideline and documents on androiddevelopers.com, so just read them and do the best practice for user. And last one is I hope enjoy PermissionsDispatcher. We would welcome issue and of course pull request by Kotlin. Alright, that's all for my talk, and please feel free to ask some question during today's after party or later this time or on the Twitter. It's so fast, but thanks for listening.